Could Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage be the so-called dream ticket? The Conservative Party, well, some in the Conservative Party think they need to stay in power. We spoke to Nigel Farage yesterday, and I've got to say, to our surprise, he didn't rule it out. He was rather more forthcoming than we expected.
I don't think under this leadership there is very much prospect of that at all. I think we're a long way away at this moment in time.
At this moment in time.
But as I say, never say never.
Not under Rishi Sunak, but potentially under a different leader.
Not
However,
at this time.
the key thing is they're only a dream ticket, Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, if you'd vote for them. So, would you welcome Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage back to frontline politics with open arms? Here's what you had to say.
Well, if there's anybody going to provide a little bit more leadership in politics in the country, that's going to be a good thing.
Absolutely not.
Why do you think that?
Both appalling.
I suppose it would be a good idea to get their ideas together, but it depends if they're willing to do that.
I don't think there's anyone that winds me up the more than he does. It's a joke, surely.
No, I think he should go back to the jungle, actually.
I echo that.
No, I don't think he should have anything to do with politics, particularly.
Well, you wouldn't be forced to vote for him, would you? No. So let's talk to journalist Moya Lothian-McLean, who says their return would put people off politics, while former Conservative member of the European Parliament, David Campbell-Bannerman, who says the move would bring back voters in their droves. Would they work together, David Campbell-Bannerman?
Yes,
they're big personalities, aren't they?
They are big personalities, I hear you. Well, they worked together in the 2019 election. They actually did a deal where Reform didn't stand against, or the Brexit Party didn't stand against Conservatives. And during the referendum, I mean, the point I would make that, you know, they managed to unify 17.4 million people to vote for Brexit together, which is more than what Boris got in 2019. That was about 14 million. So together, they are quite a package.
Meanwhile, we do actually have a Brexiteer Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
Well, supposedly so, yes. Well, I think we're watching to see what happens tonight and in general. And, of course, he's under enormous pressure, Sunak. He might go. I mean, Nigel Farage, as you mentioned, said he wouldn't serve under Sunak. But, I mean, all bets are open now, and I think he could go or step aside. And then you could get both Boris and Farage back.
How would that work? How would you get them back? Nigel Farage doesn't have a seat.
Yeah.
Boris,
nor does Boris.
Neither does Boris Johnson, although he did quite recently.
Well, I mean, there are ways and means. Obviously, the House of Lords. I mean, you know, it was only a few weeks ago. We wouldn't have believed you'd have a Lord Cameron as Foreign Secretary. So they could both be in the Lords and be given big jobs. I mean, I think that, you know...
They couldn't be leaders of their party if they were in the Lords, though.
No, that is an issue. So there might be an interim step, because obviously at the moment Boris isn't even on the parliamentary list. But you know, if there's a will, then there is a way.
Moya, you have no will, do you?
I have no will, and I think it's interesting we've been talking about it in these terms, these ideas. Oh, they might get a peerage, they might get that. It's fantasy. These men are two fantasists who sold the country these dreams repeatedly. This dream of Brexit, this dream of taking back control. But when it came to the details, they absolutely flopped it on every count. You've got two people here. One, Nigel Farage, whose malign hand, I would say, has guided the Tory party to their current incoherence, despite not actually being a Conservative member. And the other one, Boris Johnson, who presided over thousands and thousands of deaths during COVID. Why on earth would we want to welcome any of them back to frontline politics?
But just going to the premise of the question, you know, kind of independent of what you want, the question is, would it make a difference? And at the moment, the Reform Party is polling over 10% in the polls. That's 10% of voters say they want to vote for the Reform Party, and a majority of Conservatives say they want Nigel Farage to join the Conservatives. So would it help the Conservative Party?
Why should we help the Conservative Party?
I know you don't want the Conservative Party.
But the question is, does the Conservatives need them back to stay in power? Why do we need the Conservatives to stay in power in the first place?
That is a different question.
So, Moya, can I just establish you're not a Conservative Party member or a Conservative Party voter?
I'm not a Conservative Party member. I'm not a Labour Party member. I have a no party.
But if you just, you know, the question is, could it help the Conservatives to have Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage come back? I know you don't want to help the Conservatives, but think of it from their point of view for a second. Would it help them or not?
No. Well, why would it help them?
Because 10% of people are voting Reform and they would vote Conservative.
But it's just more political incoherence. It's throwing this idea of personality politics back. We've had so many personality politics in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, and it hasn't helped the country. And
so let me put it a different way. If you're not a Conservative Party supporter, would it actually help the opposition if Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage came back? Because
what
you
makes
seem
you think I'm an opposition supporter?
No, well, if you're not the Conservative, then you're clearly a supporter of some other party. I'm not suggesting you would be a Labour Party member. What I'm saying is, if you don't want the Conservatives to stay in power, then Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage coming back, what do you think anybody who felt that way might think? Because you're very critical of them.
I don't think the return of Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson to politics in general would help anything, because I think it rots our political landscape
So you say
further.
back to the jungle for Nigel, basically?
I say as far away as possible.
And out to the jungle for Boris Johnson, perhaps, next year.
David, there is a serious point, though, here, isn't there? Yeah. If 10% of people are currently voting Reform, and they came back to vote Conservative because Boris and Nigel Farage came back, that is fine. But do you think there would be some centrist Conservatives who would say, actually, I'm leaving the party or I'm not going to vote for them because these guys are beyond the pale?
Well, there's always a trade-off, to be honest. But what's happening...
But would it be net win or lose for the Conservatives?
I think a big win, because, I mean, I'm chairman of the Conservative Democratic Organisation, and we see a lot of our members who are core Conservatives wandering off to Reform or not voting at all. We're getting people turned off because they think they're not seeing a real Conservative government. So I think having Boris and Farage back would actually send a powerful signal. We're back on track, especially in the Red Wall seats, which was remarkable. Sedgefield being Conservative, I can't believe that. Or Hartley.
Moya, you might not like the idea, but they're two very successful campaigners.
But what is the point of having a successful campaigner if they can't deliver actual political change? Boris promised this, wide-ranging levelling up agenda. We've seen none of that happen. And under the current Conservative government, we've seen a return to the austerity agenda. All I know is that...
To them, they did deliver one big change. Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson both led Britain out of the European Union.
They did, and what's happened since? We've been further immiserated. All I know is that on the ground, the lives of everyday people have got immeasurably worse since both of those people entered politics. They're not the only individuals responsible, but their form of personality politics has really obscured actual policy.
Well, we asked you if Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson are needed to save the Tory party. 23% of you said they could. A whopping 77% of you said they couldn't. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Indeed.
Thank you, Moya.
I don't think those figures will put them off somehow.